Your life doesn't operate by luck, not by timing, not by circumstance. It operates based on the assumptions you silently program into your mind every single day. You may not realize it, but every choice you make, every reaction you have, every opportunity you notice or miss is rooted in what you believe to be true, even if you have no proof. That assumption is like a lens you wear over your eyes. It decides what you see, what you ignore, and ultimately who you become. If you believe you never have enough time, you'll live as if time is working against you. If you believe others always have an advantage, you'll walk with a lower posture. If you believe that everything will eventually be okay, you'll keep going even when there's nothing to prove it yet. And here's the dangerous part. Your mind doesn't distinguish between real and false. It doesn't demand evidence. It simply stays loyal to what you repeat the most. You say, "I'm not good enough," and your mind agrees. You say, "Things are getting better," and your mind agrees again. Then it begins to steer your emotions, your choices, and your behaviors in order to protect that belief. Most people live their entire lives without realizing that their minds are being programmed against the very things they desire. They want success, but assume they don't deserve it. They want love, but carry the belief that they're not good enough. They want change, but their mind whispers, "What if I fail?" So every action that follows becomes hesitant, slow, and weak. Because you can't break through if you secretly believe you can't. I've seen too many talented people imprisoned by their own assumptions. People with knowledge, skills, and opportunities, yet they never break free, not because they lack anything externally, but because inside they're still running an old program, "I'm not enough." And every time a chance comes, they hesitate. Every time a challenge shows up, they retreat. They don't act like winners, they act like survivors. You don't have to be a victim of this, but you do have to face it head on. What's the dominant assumption you're carrying? That you're someone who always fails? That you're always late to the game? That no one believes in you? Or do you believe you're improving little by little every day? You don't need to say that assumption out loud. It already shows in the behaviors you choose every morning. And if you don't intervene, it will continue to program your entire life. Your career, your relationships, even your identity. I'm not telling you to fake positivity. I'm telling you to rewrite your inner code. Because if you don't, the default based on past wounds, fears, and failures will keep dictating your present and future. Your life will repeat the same old loop. Effort, self-doubt, quitting, restarting, more doubt. And you'll think you lack motivation when what you really lack is a stronger, better assumption. Here's the truth. The world doesn't respond to your desires. It responds to the assumptions you act from. If you believe everything will be okay, you'll walk with steadiness, speak with confidence, handle crises with a calm mind. Others will sense it. Opportunities will react to it. Results will arise from the certainty you bring, not from begging or insecurity. So don't wait for the world to applaud before you believe in yourself. Don't wait for someone else to approve of you before you allow yourself to move forward. Every day you wait is another day reinforcing a false assumption. Start today, choose a new one, that you're heading in the right direction, that everything is leading you to something greater, that just because you can't see it yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Then act from that place. Every step you take will carry a different energy. Every decision will have sharper clarity. And then the world will be forced to respond as if what you believe had always been true. You don't live according to the truth. You live according to what you believe is true. And that you can choose again, starting right this second. There is a distinct difference between those who succeed sustainably and those who keep spinning in circles of disappointment. The former don't pretend, they assume. And that's why they win. Pretending is trying to hide the truth. Assuming is choosing to look toward the future as if the good has already been set in motion. I'm not telling you to pretend to be strong while you're filled with doubt. I'm not telling you to force a smile while your life feels like it's falling apart. I'm talking about a mental technique that holds real weight. Acting as if everything has, is, and will be okay. Not because you want to avoid reality, but because you're rewiring your internal reactions to influence your external outcomes. Have you ever walked into a room and noticed someone, without saying a word, carried such presence that others instinctively took a step back? They didn't need to assert anything. It wasn't arrogance, it was the energy of someone who had already defined their outcome in their mind. They walked as if the door was already open. They spoke as if the deal was already done. They lived as if what they were pursuing already belonged to them, only time was catching up. Here's what you need to understand. You don't need evidence to start believing. You need to start believing so that evidence has a chance to appear. Every major achievement began with an assumption that seemed irrational, that what didn't exist yet would come to be. When Henry Ford said he would mass-produce cars for the public, people laughed. When Thomas Edison kept creating his 1,000th prototype of the light bulb after hundreds of failures, people called him a dreamer. But they didn't need others to agree, because in their minds the outcome was already real. You can choose to see the world as a place full of obstacles, then live cautiously, hesitantly, resistant to change. Or you can choose to live as if everything is being arranged to serve you, even if you can't see it yet. This choice isn't about lying to yourself. It's a way to reprogram your mind so your entire energy leans toward action, not delay. When you assume the good is already near, you stop asking, should I? And start asking, how do I make the most of this opportunity? The problem is, most people don't live by assumption, they live by doubt. They need to see it to believe it, but because of that need, they never stick with anything long enough to see results. They say, when I'm sure, I'll begin. But it's the action taken before certainty that creates the certainty. No one sees the full path before they start. But those bold enough to assume the path already exists are the ones who take the first step and open the rest. I'm not asking you to ignore real struggles. I'm not telling you to force optimism in every situation. I'm inviting you to try a different lens. What if everything really is happening exactly as it should? What if delays, failures, silences, misunderstandings are all part of a bigger plan? If you live as if everything is already okay, you won't wait for a signal from the outside world. You'll generate the signal from within. You'll waste time seeking reassurance. You'll use that time to build, to prepare, and to act. As if success already has a meeting scheduled with you up ahead. You walk differently when you believe the door is open. You speak differently when you believe you deserve a seat at the table. You handle adversity differently when you believe it's just a curve in the road, not the end. And that difference is exactly what shapes your final result. Others wait for a sign before accelerating. You accelerate to create the sign. That's why you win. Assuming everything is already okay doesn't mean you're weak and need a fantasy to survive. You do it because you're smart enough to know your mind is the first lever of all action, and action is the only ingredient that can truly change your life. If you keep waiting for the world to convince you that you can, you'll die in uncertainty. But if you act as if you already have it, the world will no longer be able to ignore you, because the energy of someone who already believes is always stronger than any doubt that comes from outside. So instead of pretending to be okay, assume that you are already enough. Instead of forcing yourself to be strong, act as if you've already been chosen. And instead of waiting for more evidence, be the evidence for yourself. Every step you take, every decision you make from that place is an unspoken declaration. I don't live by probability, I live by conviction. And that attitude is what will pull the world closer to you, inch by inch. You cannot simultaneously believe in success and prepare for failure. You can't move forward while constantly looking back. You can't commit with a burning heart while secretly keeping an exit plan in your mind. I'm telling you this because it's a truth few dare to confront. If you're still living between two minds, one full of belief and the other full of doubt, you'll remain trapped in inner conflict where every good intention gets weakened by you before it even has the chance to bloom. Inside you there are always two voices. One whispers, keep going, you were born to do something greater. The other is cold and cautious, don't take too big a risk, what if you're wrong? The issue isn't which voice you hear, but which one you choose to act on. You cannot serve both. One of those minds must be fed, the other silenced. If not, you'll live in a never-ending tug-of-war where projects stay unfinished, goals remain halfway, and efforts are interrupted before they go deep enough to create real change. Most people don't fail because they lack goals. They fail because they don't know which mind is in charge. They wake up with determination but go to sleep in doubt. They plan with hope but act with fear. And when there isn't a unified mind leading the way, they fall into a familiar loop. Hesitation, procrastination, guilt, repeat. They call it a lack of motivation. I call it an unresolved conflict between two minds. A believing mind doesn't need external support. A doubting mind always needs more evidence, more advice, more guarantees before it dares to act. And here's what you must engrave into your memory. You can't build something great on a cracked foundation. If you plan to pursue something extraordinary, you need a kind of non-negotiable decisiveness, a level of clarity from which every choice becomes easier, not because life becomes easier, but because you've stopped feeding two opposing directions inside your head. The question you must honestly ask yourself is, which mind am I serving? The mind of a leader or the mind of someone still waiting to decide? The mind of someone committed or someone keeping a backup escape route? You don't need many people to believe in you, but you must be the first to believe in yourself. And that belief can't survive if you keep switching it on and off according to your moods. Belief doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from a clear decision that you're never turning back. I've met so many intelligent, high-potential people who live as if they constantly need a sign from the outside to confirm they're on the right path. They don't realize that it's the act of endlessly asking, am I on the right track? That's draining all their power. You don't need all the answers to begin. You just need to kill the voice that keeps making you wait for the answers. A mind that serves the goal doesn't ask, what if I fail? It only asks, if I don't do this, can I live with the regret? The doubting mind always wants to keep you safe, but that safety is a trap. It doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. It doesn't help you survive, it makes you miss every real opportunity. And when you get used to living in hesitation, you lose the ability to tell the difference between intuition and fear. You act vaguely, speak unclearly, and move slowly. Not because you lack ability, but because you're not sure which voice to trust. Look at those who created real change. Edison, Ford, Carnegie. They didn't always know how, but they knew they must. They chose a direction and burned every other option. They didn't serve two minds. They let one mind take full command, the mind of uncompromising resolve. And that's what made them extraordinary, even when everything around them said they were wrong. I don't need you to pretend to be brave. I need you to choose one mind to serve. Because in the end, you don't lose for lack of time, money, or resources. You lose because you're still standing in the middle. And when you don't clearly choose a side, life won't clearly hand you any victory either. Hesitation is a form of surrender disguised as logic. Cut it out of your system today, before it quietly destroys everything. Fear itself is not the most dangerous enemy. What's more dangerous is the story you've built around that fear and believed it as truth. None of us grow up without wounds, failures, or words that once crushed us. But the problem isn't the experience itself, it's the way you've replayed it in your mind. You failed once and began telling yourself a story that you're just not meant for success. You were rejected and rewrote the script that you're not good enough. You procrastinated and started to believe you're the type of person who will always lack discipline. Over time, those stories stop being fleeting thoughts, they become identity. I'm telling you this not to reopen wounds, but to warn you. If you don't rewrite those stories, you'll end up living the life of someone who no longer exists. A distorted version of you shaped by fear, never truly reflecting your real potential. The ironic part is, the mind doesn't differentiate between what's imagined and what actually happened. It only responds to how you keep retelling it. If you keep recalling failure as a stain, your brain will program avoidance. But if you retell failure as a lesson, your brain will reprogram courage. Most people don't live in the present. They live in a collection of memories distorted by unresolved negative emotions, and the heartbreaking part is they use those very memories to predict the future. When you say, I can't do that because I failed last time, you're not really talking about the event, you're talking about the story you've attached to it. You're not afraid of failure, you're afraid of feeling what that failure made you feel. You're not afraid to take action, you're afraid of once again proving a negative belief you're carrying inside. If you want to change your life, it's not enough to act differently. You must tell a different story. A story where no longer the victim, a story where you're the one who overcame, not the one forever labeled by the past. And to do that, you have to stop clinging to your role. You're no longer the girl who was betrayed, the guy who once failed, or the child who was never seen. You are the person writing a new chapter, and what's behind you is just an old one, not a life sentence. I've met so many people who live in the shadow of old wounds so deeply that they no longer dare to open their hearts. They reject new opportunities because they were once taken advantage of. They avoid new challenges because they once failed. But what they don't realize is every time they say no out of fear, they're unknowingly strengthening the power of that fear. And slowly they lose the ability to distinguish who they really are from the reactions of an unhealed wound. You can live like that for the rest of your life, or you can rise. Not by erasing the memory, but by consciously rewriting it with a new ending. No longer I was hurt, but I learned something valuable. No longer I failed, but I stepped closer to the version of me that's right. Because the truth is, you can't control what happened, but you can control the meaning you attach to it. And it is that meaning, not the event itself, that shapes your path today. I'm not asking you to be unrealistically optimistic. I'm asking you to become aware of how you speak to yourself. Because if the story in your head is still the old version based on fear, then no matter how many opportunities the world offers, you won't dare to step forward. But if the story you tell is one of someone who stumbled but stood back up, then you've already unlocked the strength you've been searching for. Rising isn't about denying the past. It's about facing it and refusing to let it define the present. You are not the person of your mistakes. You are the person who survived them. You are not a victim of your old errors. You are the one strong enough to learn from them and move forward. And when you do that, not perfectly, not needing to prove anything to anyone, you've laid the first brick for a future where fear no longer controls you. You are the one rewriting the story. And that story begins the moment you decide, I no longer live by fear. I live by choice. You can be intelligent, knowledgeable, even deeply driven to rise, but if every day you keep repeating thoughts like, I'm not good enough, I always fail, or I can't change, then you are reprogramming yourself to become a version rooted in doubt. And the most dangerous part of that is this. Your mind doesn't need truth, it only needs repetition. It doesn't care whether what you say is accurate or not. It just needs to hear it often enough to register it as the default signal. And then, without realizing it, your entire life begins to orbit around that very signal. The mind doesn't operate purely by logic, it operates by signals. You might say you want success, but if every day you sigh and think, I'll probably give up again, that is the signal being recorded. You might write down your goals on paper, but if internally you keep thinking, I'm not capable enough, then that goal will remain just that, words on paper. Because the brain isn't designed to chase what you wish for. It's designed to reinforce what you believe is true, regardless of whether it actually is. And here's something 99% of people are never taught. Thoughts are not always facts. But if you don't take control, they will become reality. Phrases like, I'm not good with numbers, I give up easily, I'm not a people person. They may sound harmless, but they're silent mantras, cutting off your wings before you even attempt to fly. What happens when you repeat them long enough, the mind starts building filters. You begin to see life through a narrow lens. You reject new opportunities. You avoid environments that could help you grow. You retreat before the world even gets a chance to challenge you. And here's the paradox. Strong people aren't fearless or doubt-free. They're strong because they know how to speak the right words to themselves, repeating them often enough to turn them into behavioral foundations. They don't wait for inspiration. They generate a new signal and let that signal guide them forward. They say, I am consistent, and act in that direction daily until their mind has no choice but to align. They say, I will learn how to do this. And even when they're still unsure, they keep repeating it as an unproven truth until it becomes real through sheer action. I'm not telling you to delude yourself. I'm talking about behavioral neuroscience, something the world of high achievers has long used. Your brain learns by imprinting, and whatever gets imprinted the most becomes labeled as truth, like a path in the forest. Walk it enough, and it becomes a trail. Think it enough, and it becomes a default. And if you don't choose to build a new path, you'll always end up walking the old one, even if it no longer leads anywhere. So, instead of letting fear be repeated on autopilot, deliberately choose what you want your mind to remember. Start with simple yet powerful phrases. I am becoming more consistent. I am learning how to break through. I do not quit. Then repeat. morning and night, in success and failure, in moments of clarity and moments of doubt. Repeat, not because you're trying to force yourself to believe something false, but because you are reprogramming the operating system of your thinking, preparing for the version of you that you need to become. Understand this: you cannot expect new results with an old mindset. All external change begins with planting a new message into your internal system, and that message doesn't come from the world, it comes from you. And you are the one who must read it, rewrite it, say it out loud, until your brain takes the command. This isn't pretending, this is self-leadership. If you're living under limitations, pause and ask, what have I been repeating in my head all this time? If the answer makes you feel small, then it's time to choose a new signal. It doesn't need to be complicated, just clear, precise, and empowering. Because the mind doesn't need proof, it just needs you to be consistent enough to repeat it. And once it believes, everything inside you will start acting as if it were undeniable truth. The world won't change just because you repeat a phrase, but you will change. And when you change, become more consistent, clearer, bolder, the world will have no choice but to respond. Not because of magic, but because you've sent yourself the right signal, often enough, strong enough, without retreat. That is how you rewrite your destiny. One phrase, repeated every day, until you not only believe it, but act like it was always true. Belief is not a feeling. It is a sequence of actions. Every single thing you do, no matter how small, unnoticed, or lacking immediate results, is a puzzle piece shaping who you are. It either reinforces a new belief or pulls you back into old limitations. You don't build belief by waiting for inspiration. You build it by doing, repeating, and persisting, even when you still doubt yourself. That's why the person who takes action often surpasses the one who merely thinks, because action doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to happen often enough, consistently enough, and with enough intention to prove one thing to your mind: I can trust myself. Many people think belief is a moment of sudden clarity, that one day you'll wake up and suddenly feel confident, strong, and ready to face the world. But the harsher truth is that moment doesn't come. There's only a series of seemingly small decisions: making that call you've been avoiding, finishing the task you promised yourself, saying no to an easy compromise, and those individual actions over time stack up to build what you think is natural confidence. No one is born with unwavering belief. They train it, they build it piece by piece, every time they overcome the voice telling them to quit. When you take action, you send a message to your brain: I'm in control. Even if you don't have results yet, even if you're still figuring things out, that act of initiative, no matter how small, is a powerful signal that you're no longer living in reaction mode, but in creation mode. And when action is paired with clear intention, you're not just checking something off, you're reprogramming your belief. You're telling yourself, I'm capable of finishing what I start. I'm not talking about grand gestures, I'm talking about quiet, steady, unseen acts. The things you do when you're tired, the things you keep doing when no one reminds you, the times you keep your promise to yourself, even when no one's watching. That's where real belief is built, not in front of the crowd, but in those solitary moments when you have every reason to give up, but choose to keep going. That's when you score points with yourself, and if you repeat that long enough, your mind will run out of reasons to doubt. It will have no choice but to believe. On the flip side, every time you make a promise and don't follow through, you erode the foundation of belief, and not with others, but with yourself. Every time you say, I'll start tomorrow, and don't, your mind records that as truth, that you are someone who doesn't follow through. And if you repeat that too often, you'll stop believing in yourself, even when you say positive things. That's why so many people say, I'm committed, or I will change, but nothing happens, because their minds no longer believe those words. Not because they're not good enough, but because their actions and words no longer match. The truth is, every time you overcome yourself, even just a little, you upgrade your self-definition. Every time you don't give in to laziness, don't surrender to procrastination, you send a message to your subconscious that says, I am someone who can be trusted. And that is something no one can take away from you. You don't need to be motivated every day. You just need to act like the person you want to become, so that your mind no longer needs outside validation, because it has seen you do it clearly, consistently, and for real. I've seen people rise from nothing, not because they had all the answers, but because they knew how to start without having them. And with every action tired, slow, unsure, they laid another brick on the bridge of belief, until one day, that bridge was strong enough to walk across without needing to ask, can I really do this? They just walked. And that is true freedom, when you no longer need to prove anything to the world, because you've already proven it to yourself. If you want to believe in yourself, don't wait for the feeling. Act first. Action is the physical evidence of belief. And every consistent action, no matter how small, builds the version of yourself you are becoming. Stop chasing motivation. Let every action you choose today be the clearest answer to the question, what am I building? Because whether you're aware of it or not, every action you take is a piece, and those pieces will shape the entire person you become tomorrow. There will come a time when, if you keep an exit strategy in your mind, you will never reach the end of the road. The truth is, you're not lacking potential. You're lacking a decision big enough that leaves no room for turning back. And I'll say it plainly, if you're not ready to burn all escape routes, you're not truly ready to break through. Not because you're weak, but because as long as you still have a plan B, your mind will always treat plan A as optional, not essential. Look back at every turning point you've ever overcome in life, and you'll see there were always the moments when you had no choice but to move forward. You were forced to take responsibility. You were forced to grow up. You were forced to fight. And it was that pressure, not motivation, that changed you forever. That's the moment you ran out of time for complaints, for comparisons, for backup plans. That's the moment you entered the one state that every successful person shares, the no way back state. The problem with most people is they live between two worlds. One world full of dreams, plans, and ambitions, and the other filled with just in case, what if, and if it doesn't work then, and that internal divide leaks all the power you could have used to act with conviction. When you allow yourself a way out, your mind quietly allocates energy to both options. That's why you act half-heartedly. That's why you're persistent, only for a while. That's why you always feel a lack of resolve without knowing why. I'm not telling you to be reckless, I'm telling you to be resolute. Recklessness is action without calculation. Resolve is when you've done the math, made the choice, and from there every resource within you flows in one direction. And when you commit everything to that one direction, you discover something only those who enter the no escape zone ever understand. You're far stronger than you think. You want to change your body? Throw out all the clothes that belong to your old shape. You want to build a business? Stop applying for jobs just to get by. You want to heal your soul? Clear out the people, habits, and environments that drag you back to the version you swore you'd leave. Don't call it extreme, call it by its real name. Burning the bridge behind you, not to destroy your past, but to destroy the silent paths that keep taking you back to the place you vowed to leave. The journey of change is never easy. There are moments you'll doubt yourself, so exhausted you just want to lie still forever. But something strange happens when you have no way out. You become more creative, you become more persistent, you find a way. You stop asking, should I keep going? Because in your mind, there's no alternative. You start asking, how do I get through this? And that is the question that creates breakthroughs. You could sit around for a year planning, waiting for inspiration, waiting for the perfect moment, but the day you dare to cut off the retreat, you will move faster than 100 others combined, not because you're more talented, but because you no longer allow yourself to stall. You don't need to be the smartest. You just need to be the one who refuses to look back. Every time you hold on to a safe plan, you're sending a quiet message to yourself, I'm not sure I can do this. And that message, however silent, affects every small action. It makes your words less convincing. It stops you from taking bold steps. It holds back 10% of your energy just in case. And that 10% is exactly why you can't break through. Don't let yourself live in a half-believing state about your dream. Either believe fully or let it go. There is no in-between. I'm not saying this to push you into action immediately. I'm saying it so you can see clearly. As long as you keep a way out, you'll never finish the journey. The price of freedom, of transformation, of your greater self, is non-negotiable commitment. You can't live the same way and expect your life to change. You can't keep a back door open and expect a breakthrough. You must choose, you must cross, and you must burn the bridge behind you so that when the storm comes, you have no choice but to move forward. Because at that point, when you're forced to save yourself, you'll discover what all strong people know. We don't grow in safety, we grow when there is no way back. And once you understand that, you won't need anyone to remind you anymore. You'll walk forward, because you'll know from here on out, there's only one direction left: forward. No one becomes great alone. And if you still believe success is a solitary journey, you're unconsciously locking yourself inside an invisible limitation. Your mind, no matter how strong, has blind spots. It has off days, low moods, and moments of doubt. But when you walk alongside minds on fire, you'll find yourself not only uplifted, but also ignited, challenged, and reborn. This isn't just a group of friends. No, it's an energetic network operating at the same frequency, the frequency of discipline, of action, of relentless growth. You can have the biggest dreams, but if you're surrounded by people who complain, criticize, procrastinate, and make excuses, those dreams will slowly become awkward, misplaced, and eventually a burden. Because your environment doesn't just affect your performance, it shapes your identity. Every conversation you join, every piece of advice you listen to, every story you share, all of them are bricks silently constructing the person you are becoming. And if those bricks are filled with doubt, limitations, and hesitation, no one needs to tear you down. You'll build your own prison. On the other hand, when you're surrounded by minds on fire, people who may not be the smartest but remain alert, clear, and committed, you'll be pulled into a positive force field. They don't need to cheer you on with "you can do it" or "hang in there." They simply exist at the right frequency, and that alone is enough to make you incapable of doing things halfway. No one wants to be the slowest in a group running at full speed. No one wants to be the weak link in a team charging relentlessly toward their goal. That pressure, that presence, is what elevates you faster than any workshop or course ever could. I'm not saying you need people just like you. I'm saying you need people who live by the standards you're aiming to reach. You don't have to admire them. You just need to recognize this. When you're around them, you speak differently, think differently, act differently. You become less tolerant of your own excuses. You stop justifying your procrastination. You start self-correcting. Not because anyone is forcing you, but because you cannot stay stagnant inside a disciplined ecosystem. Conversely, if you're around people who constantly doubt, mock new ideas, and find reasons not to act, then you'll constantly have to expend energy just to defend your own dreams. That's a silent form of burnout. You'll start hiding your ambition. You'll feel awkward talking about your progress. And worse, you'll begin lowering your standards just to avoid feeling out of place. Every time you do that, you lose a piece of your identity. And once your identity erodes, even if you have the tools, you'll no longer. So choose carefully who you allow near your mind. Find people who don't just talk about success, but live as if success is their default state. People who don't boast about goals, but whose daily behaviors are perfectly aligned with them. People who don't need to brag, but whose presence alone makes you want to grow. When you meet such minds, don't let go. Connect, learn, support, and most importantly, let their fire touch you, and then pass it on. I used to think I could walk alone, that with enough determination and knowledge, I could overcome anything. But I realized, while knowledge is necessary, it's your environment that shapes your speed and depth. When you're around the right people, you don't just learn strategies. You learn decisiveness, calm, and commitment that no book can teach. These are invisible lessons, but they stay with you for life. So, if you're serious about growth, ask yourself, who are you talking to? Who are you spending your time with? What are you learning from them? And most importantly, who do you become when you're around them? If the answer doesn't make you proud, don't be afraid to make a change. Don't be afraid to walk alone for a while to find the right people. Because when you find them or build them, you'll have more than an environment. You'll have a launch pad. You don't need hundreds of relationships. You just need a few who burn brightly, think clearly, stand firmly, and stay real. They won't let you slow down, and you won't let yourself regress. That's no longer just friendship. That's an unspoken pact. We grow together, or no one falls behind. And in a world full of noise, if you can hold on to that commitment, you've already gone further than 90% of those still struggling to find direction. Belief is not a privilege reserved for optimists. It is a non-negotiable standard if you truly want to build something meaningful in life. You cannot move forward while carrying doubt in your heart. Not doubt from others, but from yourself. And until belief becomes a standard you live by, every plan, every commitment, every effort will carry an invisible crack, one that will cause everything to collapse when pressure hits. You might have a smart strategy, you might be learning the right way, you might be practicing diligently, but if every action is still accompanied by the question, can I really do this? Then hesitation will eat away at everything you build. You don't need evidence to believe. You need belief to create evidence. And I'm not saying this to offer short-term inspiration. I'm saying it because it's the only way you can live as a creator of your future instead of just an onlooker. Belief doesn't mean you're always certain. It means you keep moving even when you're not. You don't wait for clarity to begin. You begin as if clarity will meet you along the way. And if you observe those who are truly successful, not just those who achieve results, but those who sustain them, you'll see one thing in common. They act as if what they're pursuing already belongs to them, even without recognition, without evidence, without ease. Your mind doesn't operate on truth, it operates on signals. And the strongest signals come from how you treat yourself. When you walk with hesitation, speak with a voice lacking conviction, retreat at every challenge, you're teaching your mind, I'm not sure I deserve this. But when you speak with clarity, work with full presence, and keep promises to yourself even when no one is watching, you're sending a different signal. I act as if I already have what I'm pursuing. And your mind will follow that signal. You cannot program belief with empty words. You have to express it through the smallest behaviors. How you wake up, how you enter a meeting, how you respond to failure, how you speak to yourself on the worst days. Belief doesn't come from bursts of inspiration. It comes from the standards you set and never bargain with. That's why people with real belief don't need to shout. They don't need to prove they're strong. They just live at a certain frequency and the world feels it. There are people who make you believe in them not because they're persuasive, but because the way they exist leaves no room for doubt. They don't need degrees, titles, or permission. They speak less, do more. They show up with precision and purpose. And every time they're present, they transmit a kind of energy, stability, depth, clarity that cannot be faked. That is the result of belief forged as a standard for living, not as a passing choice. On the flip side, if you let belief become an emotion that fluctuates with circumstances, you'll always act inconsistently. On sunny days, you'll be determined. On rainy days, you'll make excuses. When praised, you'll accelerate. When doubted, you'll shrink. And the danger is this: that instability will prevent you from sustaining results, even if you happen to reach them. Belief cannot be something that shifts with reactions. It must be a constant, non-negotiable standard set from within. And if you're asking, how can I build belief when I don't have anything yet? Here's the answer. Start living as if you do. Not pretending, choosing posture, choosing your responses, choosing how you walk, how you speak, how you think, as if you are already representing the person you're becoming. Not because you're acting, but because you understand. You must believe first, and the world will follow. That is the logic of every deep transformation. You cannot run a business, build a healthy body, maintain a strong relationship, or pursue a great mission if your belief is still something that needs reinforcement. No, it must be the default, the starting point, the foundation that is never up for debate. Everything else, skills, knowledge, strategy, is an addition, but without belief, the whole system quietly collapses beneath you. So don't ask, do I believe in myself? Ask, am I living like someone who truly believes? If the answer is no, adjust your behavior before you adjust your emotions. Because emotion is a result, not a cause. And once you start living by the right standard, you won't need to force belief anymore. You'll start acting like there's no option but success. And that's when everything begins to shift, not because you're hoping, but because you've decided, I was born to do this. Successful people are not those who calculate every step to gain more. They are the ones who default to giving more. Not out of virtue, not for recognition, but because they understand one simple truth. The world responds to the quality of value you create, not the level of expectations you keep in your head. You want to go far, don't ask, what do I get? Ask, what can I contribute that makes me impossible to ignore? When you dare to give more than expected, you're no longer playing the same game as the masses. You create a different league, one where people can't replace you, can't overlook you, and can't forget you. The difference doesn't lie in talent, it lies in your internal standards. Those who go far constantly ask themselves, can I do better, even when they've already done enough? They don't strive because they fear criticism. They strive because they know only by surpassing their own expectations can they rise above the crowd. Most people live by one measuring stick, do just enough to be accepted. But those who make a difference don't measure by social norms. They measure by personal responsibility. They don't ask how much is enough. They ask, what's the maximum I can deliver right now? You can easily recognize those playing at a higher level. They're the ones who don't wait to be asked. They take initiative. They don't need applause to give their best. They don't need an audience to maintain their standards. They don't need deadlines to push them. They're always early and always better than expected, because they don't act just to survive. They act to declare, this is my standard, and I don't bargain with it. You can be in an ordinary job, doing a small task, but the way you deliver it, if it far exceeds expectations, will quickly strip you of the label ordinary. People will remember you, mention you, and trust you, not because of your title, but because everything you touch carries the mark of distinction. And in a world where everyone wants to receive the most with the least effort, the one who dares to go the other way, to give more, to go deeper, to think further, is the one who will rise higher. So I'm not talking about blind sacrifice, I'm talking about real competitive advantage. When you give, not to get something back, but to build a reputation no one can dismiss. People may forget what you said, but they will not forget the feeling of receiving more than they expected. They'll remember the person who responded to emails faster than usual. They'll remember the one who did double the work without complaint. They'll remember the one who stepped up to solve problems while others looked for excuses to retreat. And those small details, seemingly insignificant, are what create the biggest leverage. Career, relationships, trust, they are all built from the things no one requires you to do. When you only do what's required, you'll always compete on price, time, or pressure. But when you go beyond the required, you shift from being compared to being chosen, and in the long run, the chosen always go further than the merely compliant. Don't wait for a big opportunity to finally show what you're capable of. Those who go far turn every small chance into a stage to raise their own standards. They don't need the spotlight, they are the light. So if today you're doing something everyone considers ordinary, find a way to do it in a way no one expects. Go beyond your role, go beyond the structure, and give as if you couldn't do it any other way. Because that's how you carve your name into any journey you choose to walk. You can't predict what will come from each action, but you can be sure of one thing. The world always responds most powerfully to those who dare to give more than expected, not just once, but as a way of life. A non-negotiable standard, a way of existing that makes you impossible to blend in, no matter where you are, what you do, or what circumstances surround you. And if there's one unwritten rule that governs everyone who goes far, it is this: those who give more will always receive more, but never need to ask to be recognized, because their actions are already the most vivid resume. And in a world of rising competition, that, more than anything, is the silent but irreplaceable weapon.